I am a left-leaning granola cruncher or right-leaning NASCAR lover. You got to choose one. This is a true dichotomy, right? Do you like granola or NASCAR? And 50-50. 50% of you have watched at least one J.K. Rowling movie or read one book. And 50% of you have not. I look white. I'm a white man. But I identify as black. So let me fix my coloring. Hang on a second. Let's go. Now I'm a red man. Is that too red? Whoa, now I'm orange man. Now I'm the Trumpster. Welcome if you're new here. What I've been doing is going through each chapter of the Megan Phelps interview of J.K. Rowling. We're on chapter 6. In this chapter, Megan Phelps interviews someone who I didn't know, ContraPoints, whose real name is Natalie Wynn, I think. And I'm going to play so half of the interview, and then I'm also going to play some of ContraPoints stuff, and then give my pithy comments. Make the background red? No, I think it was too bright the other day. Well, I'll let you. Do I still have it? If I make the background red, I think. Hang on. Oh, this is my William Lane Craig background. I don't think I. Oh yeah, I do have the red background. Yeah, what do you guys think? This is like episode 3 of Star Wars. I have the higher ground during this live stream. Actually, okay, we'll keep the red. Okay, let's listen to what ContraPoint says and Megan Phelps, chapter 6.
I've been asking people about kind of the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the author.
This is audio only, so don't ask for video.
J.K. Rowling. Has your relationship to J.K. Rowling changed since the early days?
I don't really care for J.K. Rowling, unfortunately, because the comments that she's made I don't agree with.
It's really sad, actually, because she seemed so progressive. The Harry Potter books, like, when we were kids, they seemed progressive.
I think to have the author of these beautiful, loving, accepting stories hurting marginalized communities, it sucks. Yeah, she's super...
I don't get this. I wish I could get this, but I don't. Hurting marginalized communities. I just can't help but think, but this is nothing but feelings. Why do we care so much about people's feelings? Can someone help me? Why do we care about hurting people's feelings? Because I don't think J.K. Rowling has actually taken a weapon and hurt a trans person ever in her life. Well, Doug, she's saying things that might lead others to do so. Show me. Show me. Come forward with the evidence of the causal link between her words and someone picking up a bat and her causing physical harm to a trans person. Well, she's saying things that will change the cultural milieu, causing certain laws to be passed. Show me. Sorry, I'm getting so emotional right now. But I get emotional when people get emotional.
Transphobic, she's a TERF. She's pretty terrible.
I really wish this was not the hill she chose to die on.
Someone like her, she really is just truly at the heart bigoted, hiding in this, sheep's costume, pretending that she is.
Okay, another thing, bigoted, transphobe. I know I shock people when I ask these simple questions, but I love asking simple questions that most people think are duh questions. But forcing people to articulate their answers is fun for me to listen to and watch. So here it is. This is especially for the granola crunchers out there who answered that poll. This is not for the NASCAR lovers. But for the granola crunchers out there, ready? Put your seatbelts on. Why is being a bigot bad? Why is being a transphobe bad? And don't just go, oh, duh, what a stupid question. Actually think about your answer. and how you would articulate that.
As I have been working on this series, the accusation that's come up over and over again is that J.K. Rowling is a transphobe and a bigot. In fact, last year at LeakyCon, a Harry Potter fan convention, staff took the accusation so seriously that at one point, they announced that attendees should report anyone who was vocally supporting Rowling in any way, saying, quote, "We have zero tolerance for transphobia and bigotry of any kind."
Yeah, sorry, but this just reminds me of Tattletales in junior high school. Like, Principal O'Shaughnessy, so-and-so said this. Oh, thank you.
For many people who support Rowling, they say that these accusations are so off base that they can be dismissed out of hand. But for me, bigotry is not an accusation that I can take lightly. And that's because for a long time, I was a notorious bigot.
Megan Phelps?
The Westboro Baptist Church is known for picketing the funerals of U.S. soldiers and Marines in protest over what the church sees as the ills of American society.
The Westboro Baptist Church is one of America's most notorious religious hate groups.
From the time I was 5 years old, I could be found almost every day protesting alongside my family.
That's another question, one of those gasp type questions, as Jacob Smith pointed out. Why is hating people bad? And I think I know the answers that the typical person would make, and that is because it leads to physical violence. Or actually, many people on the left wouldn't even go that far. They would take out physical. It leads to violence, and words are violence. But why is that type of violence bad, the word type? Because it hurts someone's feelings. I think we're all agreed on left and right that physical violence is bad. In most cases, sometimes physical violence is good if you're protecting someone.
As proud members of the Westboro Baptist Church.
God's wisdom has been crying to this evil nation. Listen to these lying politicians, letting your children be taught it's okay to be gay.
We became infamous for picketing events, like the funerals of soldiers and celebrities, with signs that said unspeakably cruel things.
God hates fags. Fags doom nations.
Fags are worthy of death.
See, now, I've, on my religious channel that I've been doing for, 6 years now? Yeah, something like that. I've had many Christians tell me, someday, Doug, you'll know the truth. Every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess that Jesus is Lord, and you will wake up in torment, in hell. You're going to hell, Doug. I don't know how many times I've heard this. And guess how much it's impacted me? 0. Hasn't made a dent. Why? Because I truly believe hell doesn't exist. And there's no reason to take that type of threat seriously. And I don't understand why people will take these threats from these right-wing NASCAR lovers as seriously, any more seriously than that. Now, don't get me wrong, it is way more probable that someone can do physical harm than me going to hell. Because there's no reason to think hell exists. But we do have examples in history of people doing physical violence on other people. But merely just saying that you hate someone doesn't mean there's going to be physical violence done to you if someone hates you. I know that's hard for some people on the left to believe. But just think about all the people who have said, I hate you so much I want to kill you, and have never done it. Just think about what percentage of the world are actual murderers. I think it's less than 1%. I think it's way below 1%. In the United States alone, hang on, let me get my trusty calculator out here. I think in 2020, the number of murderers was like 22,000 or something, out of a population of 350 million. What's the math on that? .00063%. Is that right? 0.00063%? No, 0.06%. So incredibly small.
And I know it's hard for some people to believe this, but we truly didn't see these words as cruel and bigoted. We thought that what we were doing was right, as you can hear me try to argue here at one of our protests 12 years ago.
If you see your neighbor sinning and you don't warn them, what you're doing is you're tacitly enabling and encouraging them on their way to hell. That's not loving your neighbor. So how can you love your neighbor unless you're out here?
You know, and I agree with Megan Phelps here. If her worldview is true, or what she used to believe is true, it would be loving to warn people about hell. And then you can have a conversation of why you think hell exists, why your worldview is correct. But notice that the Westboro Baptist people, though, the cult that Megan Phelps used to be in, they were more open to conversation, at least some type of dialogue, than I think a lot of people on the left are willing to do. I call them woke. Isn't that interesting? That as bad as Westboro Baptist people were, they were still willing to have dialogue. I remember Thunderfoot going to visit them and having a conversation. They had nothing to, like, they didn't say, well, you're of the devil, you're going to hell, we're not going to talk to you. They didn't talk like that. No, they were more than happy to sit face to face with someone and have a conversation and say, hey, look, I'm telling you the truth. You're going to hell if you don't believe. But so many people on the left will say, oh, you are a racist, bigot, transphobe. We do not associate with you. We do not talk to you. You shouldn't be listened to. You shouldn't be given a platform.
This is about love. This is about love. Exactly. This is the definition of love. But people, they are the definition of a hatred. They don't think it's love. What would you tell them?
We saw ourselves like the biblical prophets, warning people that they needed to obey God, or else suffer his curses in this life and hell in the next. And we proudly defended our views, like in this clip of my mom and me on the Tyra Banks show back when I was 20 years old.
You said, why are you so angry? Well, we're not angry. What we're trying to do is get the point across to people who hate our message, who hate us, who hate God, who hate his judgments. That's why we have to get
a little defiant.
Yeah.
Because we have to make sure if you're going to hear us that we talk loud enough to be heard, because you cut us off before we say the words because you don't like the words.
And it's not just you, it's everybody we talk to.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? We're trying to get our point across to people who hate us. They want to talk to people who hate them. And they feel like they're getting cut off before the words even come out of their mouth. This is a huge difference. This is, I think, one of the main differences from people who lean right and left. That people who lean left are less likely, not always, but less likely to want to even hear things. The right's guilty of this too, don't get me wrong, but I think it is more prevalent on the left.
From the outside, I understand how this all sounds absurd, but we actually saw ourselves as living out meaningful values and virtues, like courage. When we protested, we knew people would hate us for it. We knew there would be people who would even attack us for it.
So I understand that there's some people that don't like what you have to stand for, and they've taken some strong actions about that. Why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah. We've had so many crimes committed against us, vandalism. We've had cars driven at us. We've been shot at. And I thought this was the, do your own thing generation. Tolerance, loving. Yeah. Where is that?
There were people who bombed my house, set our church on fire, regularly vandalized our homes, doxed us, and sent us death threats and rape threats in enormous numbers.
Yeah, that sort of thing, I think both sides, well, I was going to say both sides agree it should not happen.
And these attacks only furthered our feelings that we were being persecuted for telling a hard truth to the world, to a society that would rather hurl insults at us or violently attack us than listen to us. After I left the Westboro Baptist Church at age 26, I had to wrestle for a long time with some truly terrifying questions. How was it that I could be so certain that I was right and still be so wrong for so long? How was it that my critics, even the ones who would...
What's interesting is, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What's interesting about life is Megan Phelps could have been right initially. Like, if you value truth, you got to be open to the idea that what you currently don't possess it. In a way, it would be kind of ironic and hilarious. Not hilarious in a good way, but hilarious in a bad way. If the Westboro Baptist church people are actually correct and Megan Phelps left the truth. See, she's pretty certain. She was certain back then that she was wrong. I mean, right. And now she's certain that her former beliefs are wrong. Certainty can be a real pain.
Threaten and attack us, had seen reality more clearly than I had. And most terrifying of all, how could I ever trust my own mind again?
Good question.
When I go back and watch these videos of myself on the Tyra Banks show or me picketing these funerals, there's a part
Maybe she isn't certain now. I don't know.
Me that wants to say, that was a different person. But the truth is, I am still that person. It was me who held those beliefs. It was me who shouted those cruel words at grieving families. Ever since I left,
Matish Patel says, transgender in schools is just dog whistling. Using the phrase dog whistling is a type of dog whistling. Because basically what you're saying is people who talk about the transgender in schools are really racist, homophobes, transphobes, and bigots. Why don't you just come out and say that instead of dog whistling, Matish? Gotcha.
I've been cautious, just so careful when trying to discern what is true, what is right, what is good. I try to stay away from certainty, to remember that at any given moment, I am only seeing a tiny fraction of the world. I tell myself to embrace humility. And one of the ways that I do this is by listening, really listening to people and where they're coming from. I try to understand them and their experiences and their values and how they've come to the positions that they have.
Sounds like street epistemology.
So, after speaking with Rowling and trying to really understand her experiences and how they shaped her views, I left Scotland and did the same thing with many of her critics, including many who are transgender. Now, of course, trans people, like all people, are not a monolith. In working on this project, I met trans people who agreed with Rowling and...
What? There's trans people who agree with Rowling? They must not be true trans people. They must be fake ones.
Admired her for speaking up, and others who viewed her as such a menace that they didn't want to be on a podcast that included her voice, and many more in between. But for today, I want to share two conversations with two different critics.
Here it comes.
Who not only were thoughtful in their critique of Rowling, but were also really frank with me about the difficult experiences that inform their views.
Women's liberation.
Okay, so this is ContraPoints, Natalie Wynn. She also talks to a guy named Noah, but I'm not going to play that.
Equality. I think that we both support gay marriage, for example, as the sort of very basic 2010 level activism. I think that we both recognize that far-right movements like Donald Trump politics, for example, are dangerous. I think those are kind of the foundations, and then things quickly start to split.
Yeah, I would love to press people who say, like, Donald Trump is dangerous. Give me specifics. Tell me how. Show me the causal link.
This is Natalie Wynn, a popular YouTuber better known as ContraPoints. She makes artful and insightful videos about politics, culture, the internet, and about being transgender.
A lot of people have the sense that, oh, being trans is this kind of fad. People go online and then they get sort of transed by exposure to the social contagion in these trans communities. Well, I mean, in my case, I will say that I experienced gender dysphoria and experienced these kinds of subjective personal things long before that. But the internet makes it possible to form communities out of people who would otherwise be very geographically isolated. You know, I think like less than 1% of people are transgender. So I don't think I actually met someone who I knew was transgender.
Is that still true? Because I think since 2017, 2018, and then 2020, because of COVID, well, I shouldn't say that. but I believe that. I shouldn't say it, but I believe it. COVID, the isolation in 2020, everybody staying at home has caused so much mental illness and craziness that the people's identities were even in more confusion, and I think it exponential curve with non-binary and trans. So when people say it's only 1 or 2%, I think in certain demographics, at least, like kids under 18, it's more than 2%, right? Someone can fact check me on that.
Until I was in my 20s. And, if the only experience that you really have with trans people is whatever media you saw about trans people from the 90s and 2000s, you've seen portrayals that are monstrous, that are alien, that are
mocking.
Right. It's always a punchline, or it's like a horror story. You don't want anything to do with it. Mm-hmm. For me to sort of conceptualize myself as, I am a transgender person, I had to actually see trans people who seemed like people, right? And YouTube was great for that.
Natalie transitioned in 2017, and she says that YouTube was revelatory.
There's, trans people sharing their transitions, and that was really helpful to me to recognize, this is something that I want to do.
She says it not only helped her on her path to self-discovery, but it also inspired her to share aspects of her own transition on her channel.
There's something about YouTube that it makes it easy to kind of share private things about yourself with a big audience because you are talking to a camera alone in your room. There's a kind of false intimacy of that. I feel that...
Yeah. Talking to a camera alone in your room. I don't know how people can do that, actually. I can't. I've done a few videos like that. I need at least 1 or 2 people in the live stream in order to talk. I need a little bit of... I can press pause or I can stop my thoughts and respond to somebody. But it seems kind of weird and sick to me in a way to to speak to a camera alone in a room. It's weird if you think about it.
There's a lot of things that I said to a YouTube audience that I had never said to my own friends and family even. It just felt easier to say to anonymous people on the internet.
And that experience of sharing these intimate parts of her life with so many people online, she says it was really significant.
The early transition era of my life online was a kind of mix of the rush of this Disney let it go moment, right? Where you've broken all the rules of your upbringing and done something that you're very drastically not supposed to do. As a person who is assigned male at birth, you're really not supposed to be a woman. And so...
Assigned male birth. That phrase actually bothers me a little bit. And not to say that it's untrue, but it makes it sound like it's a matter of opinion. Assigned male at birth. Rather, you could phrase it as, you are male at birth, right? See the difference?
If over the course of years, this kind of need, this longing has been building up, it does feel good at first to finally let it go.
My guest today is self-described YouTuber and ex-philosopher Natalie Wynn, better known as ContraPoints. The Verge has called her an elegant, whip-smart middle finger to the...
Her videos, including the ones following her transition, ended up becoming really...
I wish they wouldn't have said that. They said they said she's an ex-philosopher. Some people are going to be mad at me for calling ContraPoints a she, even though she was born a male. But to me, I just, whatever comes out of my mouth, whatever flows. I've seen pictures of her. I'm looking at one right now. Some pictures, I immediately think she. Other pictures, I think he. So whatever fits. Whatever my pattern-seeking mammal lizard brain says. Here we go.
Popular.
Today, we are very lucky to have Natalie Wynn, aka ContraPoints, an ex-philosopher.
Wynn's impact on YouTube culture is so notable that the Library of Congress recently said it was archiving her entire channel.
She was featured in the New York Times, Vice, NPR, BuzzFeed, and pretty quickly, she became a very well-known trans person.
I was suddenly very prominent, I was very visible.
And all this attention, it ultimately led her to getting over 1.5 million subscribers to her...
1.5 million subscribers. Hang on a second. If you go to socialblade.com, let me see how much she makes a year. ContraPoints. What's your guess? In your head, put your guess in. I'm going to guess, I haven't looked yet. I'm going to guess she makes, I have no idea what kind of views she gets. Subscribers is one thing. Views is what really matters. I'm going to guess 690,000 a year. Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm way off. Only 108,000 a year. Only. But I'm sure that does not include Patreon. Is there a Patreon account? Excuse me. Let me look here. About become a Patreon. Yes. $5 a month is the default position. 16,000 patrons. Okay, hang on a second. Calculator. Oops, not that one. What do you think? $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month? Yeah, let's just use 5. 5 times 16,823, almost 17,000. That's $84,000 a month times 12 plus 106,000 in added revenue. ContraPoints makes 1.1 million a year. Yeah, and I guess, what did I say? 690, 790, whatever I said. 1.1 million a year. The bravery of coming out trans is worth 1.1 million a year for some people. Oh, that's cynical, Doug. Be quiet.
Her channel. But it also attracted a lot of transphobic hate.
I've been doxxed. I've been swatted.
Oh, geez.
I've received death threats, mutilation threats, anger.
Yeah, and I think whether you lean left or right, well, I'll speak for myself, who leans right. Being doxxed, being swatted, specific death threats, not good. Bad. But saying you disagree with someone and hurting their feelings, not bad.
Shaming, mockery, any kind of terrible online behavior you can imagine, I've been the target of. I would say that at first it was primarily from anti-trans people, but when you become sort of a very prominent person from a marginalized community, you sort of inevitably are going to attract a lot of aggression from that community itself.
In 2019, Natalie posted a tweet indicating that...
Yes, Nitty, I'm sure she does work hard on her content, and it's not just about coming out. I'm being facetious. In fact, I'm going to compliment her probably in half an hour. I'm going to say many great things about her.
She didn't like how sharing pronouns in what she called hyper-woke spaces made her feel. And that, along with the fact that she briefly worked with a controversial trans man, inspired a really vicious backlash where she was called a Nazi, a grifter, and a traitor to the trans community. People online not only targeted her, but demanded that her friends and people she'd worked with publicly denounce her.
When I was being Twitter mobbed, where the trans community kind of really turned on me, I remember walking around Baltimore.
See, I immediately have respect for her, and I don't even know the details, but I have respect for her when she says that her own in-group turned on her. I like that. I like it when, like as an atheist, other atheists turn on me. It is a sign that you're just not kowtowing to your friends, your family, that you have your own ideas, your own thoughts, and you're willing to say it publicly, even if that means someone who is in your tribe won't like you. And if that's what happened to Natalie, great job.
With a hoodie over my head and sunglasses and headphones in, because I was actually almost delusional about how total my ostracism was. I sort of thought I would be hated on the street, which is crazy in retrospect, but that's how it felt at the time. It's overwhelming. And that honestly got worse than the transphobia.
Because coming from people that you would see as your allies.
Yeah, it's kind of easier to dismiss hateful bigots because it's like, well, whatever, like they're going to hate me regardless. But when it's from people whose like political side that you're supposedly aligned with, and from people who share your identity, and they're the ones who are really coming at you the hardest, like, yeah, it's painful. You know, being trans is a pretty socially isolating experience in general, and a lot of trans people rely pretty heavily on other trans people.
See, I agree with Natalie that it's a little more hurtful, although I can't relate to that too much. But to me, even then, like on my religious channel, 90%, 85% of people who watch my religious channel are atheists, and a lot of them have turned on me, but it doesn't really bother me. What would bother me if my own wife said something, or someone really, really close to me. But strangers on the internet who you sort of have a relationship with, not really, like you've talked in a comment section a few times, no.
For support. So when you are an outcast from the trans community, you feel very alone.
And this experience that Natalie had.
Yeah, feelings of aloneness. I think these are the real issues, feeling alone.
Which she used to make one of my favorite of her videos called Cancel Culture. Gave her a deeper insight into why it is that speaking about trans identity and gender issues online so often leads to these vicious public shamings, even towards allies to the trans rights movement.
I think that a lot of trans people are living with intense shame, and there's a lot of bitterness because people feel excluded from society, a lot of times thrown out by their family.
Yeah, feel excluded.
Humiliated by their families. And when you have unresolved anger and bitterness and humiliation, that's aggression in search of a target. And when you feel downtrodden.
Yeah, but you know, I'm just going to say it the way I see it. Natalie's describing children who don't know who they are, feel like they're being ganged up on by, in this case, society, feel like they're not loved, and so they lash out. I'm not saying adults can't do this, and they often or sometimes do, but this is way more prevalent with children, and this is part of the maturity process.
And you feel abused and you feel humiliated. There's a vindictive impulse. You want revenge, not just justice. But often the person that we take revenge against is not really the person who's responsible, but rather they are a symbol of all the pain that we feel.
Yeah, I have all these stereotypes, and time again, these stereotypes are proven correct. It's about feelings, just feeling sad and lonely, depressed, not loved, not accepted.
You need a scapegoat.
A scapegoat, yeah.
In January 2021, Natalie released a video essay.
So you've probably heard by now about Joanne Rowling's transphobic tweets, unless you've been living under a rock, in which case, get back under that rock, sweetie. There is nothing good going on up here.
And in it, she unpacked her thoughts about J.K. Rowling.
Or maybe you heard that all Joanne did was say biological sex is real, and now crazy gender ideologues and trans activists are trying to silence her. This is cancel culture gone too far. This is a witch hunt. Celebrities are under attack. This is the new Salem. This is Orwell's nightmare.
And one of the reasons that I really wanted to talk to her was that, as a transgender fan of Harry Potter, who was also a critic of cancel culture, she was critiquing Rowling from the point of view of someone who has been deeply interested in the very same dynamics in our society that I had been investigating myself.
This is a painful topic for me all around because as a transgender woman, I am honestly hurt by a lot of the things Joanne has said in the last year. But I also know what it's like to be the target of a Twitter mob. And I realize that to most people, complaining about being canceled, it sounds incredibly whiny and self-absorbed.
Yes. See, Nitty, this is one thing. This is not the thing I was thinking about, but I agree with Natalie here. It's like, oh, you canceled me.
Like, you'd especially think that rich and famous people like J.K. Rowling would be above staying up alone at night reading mean things people say online. But you'd think wrong. And when I see her getting trashed on the TL, there's a traumatized part of me that's unironically triggered by watching people cancel her. But there's also a part of me that wants to join the trashing. How could you do this to me, Joanne? I did not come out of the cupboard.
She sounds conflicted.
So in that video, I distinguish between what I'm calling sort of two rhetorical styles of bigotry, which I call direct and indirect. Direct usually involves framing the target as vermin, invaders, parasites, right? This sort of dangerous, foreign, infiltrating menace. The idea that bigotry is simply hate, I call the Westboro Baptist Church theory of bigotry. It's the idea that bigots are people who outright say, we hate you, God hates you, and we're all marching around with signs about how much we hate you.
I think in the video you used my family as an example of direct bigotry.
Yeah, the Westboro Baptist Church, God hates fags, pretty direct, right? And I think that in some ways, like it can render it less.
Has the Westboro Baptist people... Okay, so this is an example of direct bigotry, according to Natalie here, from ContraPoints. As far as I know, the Westboro Baptist people have never, ever killed anyone or taken a bat and injured them. As far as I know, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody from that church has done physical harm to any human on the planet. Am I wrong? Now, what would you rather have? Would you rather have someone come up to you and saying, God hates you and you're going to hell? Or would you rather have them pick up a bat and hit you in the head? Choose. Choose. What would you rather have? Someone look you in the eye and say, you're vermin? You're a terrible person, you're disgusting, and you're ugly. Would you rather have that? Or would you rather have someone take a knife and stab you in the back? Choose. Sometimes a little perspective is good.
It's dangerous.
It's not insidious.
Yeah, because I don't think that it's as influential. You know, protesting at funerals, that puts people off. People don't want to be associated with that.
It kind of has the opposite of the effect of getting people on their side. It alienates people and pushes people away.
Yes, but remember that like the political talking points that were used, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when the sort of Bush era conservatives made opposition to gay marriage a major point of their platform, it was not about God hates fags. It was about defending marriage. Like, we have to protect this institution. That's the foundation of the family.
And what's ironic is I think during that time and even today, you can find many homosexuals who would still say that marriage should be between one man and one woman. And yes, they can say, I am gay, but I still think or they could at least say, I have no problem with keeping the traditional definition of marriage alive. It's no skin off my back. I don't have this neediness inside me as a gay man. I'm not gay. I'm not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with it if I were, but they don't have this neediness to say, oh, if you get to get married, then I got to get married. Right? There's a lot of gay men and women out there who are like that. And because you can have like civil unions, you can have contracts, for the hospital thing or children thing. You don't need to get married. It's just like, I want something you have type of idea.
Here to protect children. There was this kind of fear that if we allow for ambiguity, if we allow for the strict rule about one man and one woman, and we include two men or two women, then order falls apart.
Slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope, and then anything could happen, right? Indirect bigotry manifests as...
Nate Phelps spoke to an audience Thursday night at the Lawrence Arts Theater about the physical and psychological abuse. Okay, psychological abuse doesn't count in my question, but the physical does. Physical abuse that the late Fred Phelps, Nate's father, put him through. Okay, so you're talking about corporal punishment. Yeah. Of Nate's father's to his children. That's... I'll give you that. Physical violence to a child, corporal punishment. But then, I tell you got you got to admit then that that's no different than probably 30-40% of the whole United States population. Like if you're talking about spankings on the bum. But I don't know the details. Did he go into details? Are we talking about strapping to the point where there's blood and welts and all that sort of thing.
Concern or debate about a host of proxy issues. It's often defensive in tone rather than offensive. Frequently the claim is that a once needed liberation movement has now gone too far, but it's now the activists who are the... There's a kind of parallel, right, between where people are afraid that if we allow trans people to participate in society, then the gender order will collapse, and then it'll be anything goes, and men can invade any women's space, and the protections, such as they are, that exist for women will fall apart because of the collapse of the gender order.
That is one of the bigger arguments. Yep. And we have and we do have examples of that actually happening in society. Now, it's very, very rare, but it does happen.
And when it comes to those ideas of direct and indirect bigotry, when it comes to Rowling and her views about, prisons or childhood transition, is your claim that Rowling is being transphobic indirectly and maybe even unknowingly?
I mean, I think that I'm willing to engage with someone who is skeptical, for example, about is it fair for trans women to be in sports? Because I don't know, it's honestly a question I have myself. But I feel like that my willingness to engage with that is going to decrease if it's with someone who I think doesn't really believe in trans acceptance at a much more fundamental level, which...
Yeah, but what does trans acceptance mean? Does that mean that... See, she's saying, I'm not going to engage in the trans sport argument if it's with someone who doesn't accept trans. But if someone who's against trans women in sports, if that's the definition of not being accepting of trans, then she's not going to even engage in an argument about trans sports. Right? It's sort of cyclical. See, my theory is that when it comes to trans sports, just make a simple rule. If you're born with a penis, you can't do women's sports. And there will be some very rare exceptions with intersex. But other than that, it's a pretty good rule of thumb. And the only downside of that is some people are going to cry. But to me, that's not that bad. Because I think fewer people are going to cry if you make that simple rule.
Which is kind of the feeling that I get from Joe Rowling. So J.K. Rowling frames her position as, I am just saying the fact that sex is real. It's not hateful to say a fact. Why is everyone so mad at me? A fact can't be bigoted. And I agree that a fact cannot be bigoted.
Oh, this reminds me of the conversation I had with, what's his name? Where I just pointed out some facts. There's some facts you shouldn't say out loud.
But a fact on its own doesn't mean very much. Usually when we discuss facts, we're using those facts to tell a story. And facts can be used to tell bigoted stories.
This is the difference between some, I'm going to just call woke people on the left and people on the right. Facts don't really mean anything in themselves. They're used to tell a story, a lived experience, chalked up with nuance. And yeah. In order to make correct decisions on public policy and all that, you have to at least know what the facts are, right? That's the starting point. That's probably the hard part.
Suppose someone...
This was, I think, one of the hardest parts of your critique to consume because of just my own understanding of how important doubts are and how important open dialogue is. Obviously, because of that being the most transformative thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I just wanted to ask you to help me understand where you're coming from. So one critique you make clear in the video, seeing it as the coded language of indirect bigotry, is the danger of people who say that they're just asking questions. And I totally see what you're talking about, because there are, for sure, bad actors and also just people with really bad ideas.
Yeah, see, this is... I think I disagree with Megan here. Just asking questions, there's bad actors. But let's assume you do have a bad actor and their motives are terrible. Their motives are to destroy the trans movement. But all they're doing, though, let's say in their soul, in their hearts, they want to destroy the trans movement. But their actions are asking simple, short questions. So what? If that's what they're doing, if that's all they're doing is asking short, simple questions. Like, what is so bad about that, even if their motives are horrendous? Can someone explain that to me? Because these questions, Doug, lead to people doubting who they really are in themselves. Well, that's a them problem, right?
And all these people online who make their whole careers out of you.
Doug's philosopher voice has now become the liberal voice. That's crazy. Good observation, Jerome.
Using the just asking questions idea as a smokescreen, essentially, right? But there are a lot of people, and I've met many of them while working on this project, who just genuinely have a lot of questions, and sometimes they're afraid to ask them. And I think asking tough questions and pulling apart arguments is, it's obviously a cornerstone of reasoning. And it's actually...
She said a fact can be bigoted. Those statements have different meanings. She said a fact. How can a fact be bigoted? How can a fact be bigoted? Like, the earth is a sphere. Can that be bigoted? No. The sun is a glowing ball of gas. Can that be bigoted? Bigoted? No. 50% of all the murders in the United States are committed by African Americans. Can that be bigoted? I'd still say no. It's a fact. Oh, Doug, you racist, you.
Thing that you do so well on your YouTube channel. So I just wonder, like, why is it that you see Rowling and other people in this debate?
You're right, Jerome. I use the philosophical voice and the liberal voice, the nuanced voice of people who don't like.
Why do you see that as if they're just like clearly trying to disguise bad intentions?
I don't necessarily see it.
Oh, can't. Not, didn't you type can? She said, can't. A fact can't be bigoted. Yes, okay, sorry. My apologies, Ray. I read too fast.
As just trying to disguise bad intentions.
But I basically view what I said then as me bolstering the point. Yeah, there we go. Good save.
I think I'm less concerned with the intentions than I am with the consequences. And when you have someone who is as influential as J.K. Rowling, posing ignorant, loaded questions on Twitter.
Ignorant, loaded questions. See, I really empathize, because I'm a very, very empathetic person. I really empathize with J.K. Rowling here and the against the ideas of ContraPoints here. Listen to what ContraPoints says.
Consequences. And when you have someone who is as influential as...
I've been told I'm influential with only 17,000 subs.
J.K. Rowling, posing ignorant, loaded questions on...
Ignorant, loaded questions. That's a kind of a subjective thing, right? How do you know they're ignorant? How do you know they're loaded? Even if they are ignorant and loaded, what's the problem? Let's say I ask ignorant, loaded question. What is the problem? Just answer the question. Now, I do admit that a loaded question can, even if you answer it, doesn't really help much, because there's so many assumptions and premises behind the question that you might not agree with. But you could still answer the question saying, I reject the premise of the question. And then if someone is of good faith, they'll say, well, what's the hidden assumption or premise of the question? Then you explain it. And then it snowballs into a very constructive, usually a constructive conversation.
Twitter, like, this is not the acceptable forum for that level of discourse, right?
I'm a flat earther phobe.
So, okay, yes, there's very complicated questions that are legitimate to be asked, but I feel like, I don't know, if you're going to be someone with a huge platform who wants to like pose these questions, you kind of have to be responsible for the way that you go about doing that. If you do it in a way that's harmful to trans people as...
Okay, but what's the harm? Show me the causal link. Show me a question that J.K. Rowling has posed and show me how it's harmed a trans person. Besides just making them feel bad and crying. Show me someone... Like, I can change my mind on this. For example, I will change my mind like that, in a second, if someone can provide for me someone who said, I'm a huge J.K. Rowling fan. I heard her say X, and I did act X because she said so. But questions are not saying to do X. It's asking questions. I don't get this. How can asking J.K. Rowling asking a question cause harm? Other than just making someone feel icky. Or I don't feel supported. You got to stop this. Because there's going to be a day where you're going to ask questions, you leftist woke people, and someone is going to say to you, how dare you ask that question? You're doing harm.
I consider it beyond any question that the way J.K. Rowling has done it has been harmful, then I think it's valid for people to be upset with you and to criticize that.
Is it that you believe that it's dangerous to ask the questions, or just that you don't trust that she's actually engaging in good faith?
It's primarily that I don't trust that she's engaging in good faith.
Yeah, it's her intentions. It's her motivations. I mean, how can I trust someone if their intentions are bad? Just answer the questions that she's posing. Who cares what her intentions are?
I've never really gotten the impression that she wants to know more about the experiences of trans people from the way that these questions are posed. It's all about, isn't this dangerous to all of the rest of us, right?
How? How are the posing questions dangerous to you? How do you know the Bible is the Word of God? That's a dangerous question. Don't ask Christians that question. How do you know hell is real? That's a dangerous question. As a Christian, I find that question offensive. How do you know the Holy Spirit's in your in you, leading and guiding you to all truth? That I find that question offensive. It's dangerous. It's hurtful. You're questioning my Lord and Savior. You're questioning that I have the Holy Spirit. You're questioning hell is real. I find that very offensive, dangerous, and harmful. Your intentions is to get me to doubt. See, this is great, because I know a lot of you woke leftists here hate guys like Mike Winger, but you're acting like Mike Winger right now if you do this. You're trying to get me to doubt my faith. You're trying to get me to doubt the whole transphobia, trans community. I don't know what. I mean, stop it. It's either full support or nothing. Either you fully support us or you shut up. In your heart, your intentions have to be pure. And if they're not pure, then be quiet, especially if you have influence. This is what I'm hearing. And I find it disgusting, frankly. I'm getting emotional right now.
Aren't these people posing a threat to us?
Who's Mike Winger? Yeah, sorry, I bring up examples of people on my other channel. If you're not familiar with my other channel, just ignore what I said there. But Mike Winger is a fundamentalist Christian, very conservative.
Isn't this dangerous to children? Like, I see that as a very loaded question.
Right, so you're saying it's not the text, but the subtext, in other words.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, the subtext is you need to love me. You need to accept me. You need to agree with me. That's the subtext I'm hearing here. And if you don't have this in your heart, in your soul, then maybe you should ask these questions.
Do you think there's any validity to the concerns that she's raised about the possibility of rushed care?
There is a small minority of trans people who detransition. And many of these people do kind of cite...
I would love to know, the data on that. Do we have good, reliable data on that? This is... The whole concept of transitioning medically is fairly new. Maybe you really can't get good data on this for another, 20 years and then look back. But I've heard the number 1% to 2%. And my intuitions, my feelings on this is that is way higher than that. That the regret of transitioning is way higher than 1% or 2%. Now, I'm totally open to being wrong on this. Totally open to being wrong. But I will make a prediction if I live 20 more years, which I will, I know it because all my great uncles. My dad's 83 and he's had a heart attack and cancer and everything. He's a tough guy. So if I live to my 90s, which is 40 years from now, I'm going to come back on this show and I'm going to say the percentage of regret from transitioning is at, I'm going to predict 50%, 50. And then I'll come back on the show when I'm 92. And if I'm right, I'm going to say, ha ha, I was right. And if I'm wrong, I'll say, I apologize. My prediction was false.
That trans identity for them was some kind of shelter from other issues going.
Ray Cosby, you can't trust Google. You know that they're a woke organization, right? I mean, hard scientific data with a huge sample size. You're all for a large sample size. Maybe there is some out there like with thousands of sample size, but I haven't seen any. Have you? You can post it, and if it is hidden, I will make it unhidden.
On in their life. But the idea that trans care is rushed is something that probably is pretty grating to most trans people to hear, because most trans people have this experience of sometimes years-long waiting lists to get care, of having to jump through all these hoops, of having to...
Yeah, people on the right, just to let you know, Natalie, they think that's a good thing, that it shouldn't be rushed. It should take years. There should be hoops, especially if you're a minor, if you're like 14, 15 years old. The goal, actually, I would say, is to make it so slow and so careful that by the time you get a green light, you probably are already over 18.
Answer sort of invasive questions about, why you're transitioning and so on, having to really fight, in other words, for care. So the idea that, we're just throwing any teenager who plays with the wrong type of toys into the transition pipeline, that's just not happening. Probably some people are getting sloppy care, because that's generally a problem with healthcare in the US and the UK. The medical infrastructure is actually not that great. But I feel that this is being presented as a bigger problem than it in fact is, which is not to minimize like that. Obviously, it's very painful if you transition and then realize that you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't happen that often.
Mm-hmm. So is your issue on the possibility of trans children transitioning being rushed in some cases, is that you and Rowling don't necessarily have a totally different point of view, but more about what she's choosing to focus on?
Well, it's the difference here on this issue of transitioning is not so much that there shouldn't be safeguards and a lot of care taken to make sure it's the correct decision. It's just a matter of time. I think Natalie would say, well, it should be done faster, more efficiently, and people like J.K. Rowling and myself would say, no, it should be done more slowly, more safeguards. It's not a difference in opinion, it's a difference in degree. Like, I think if you're 28 years old, your prefrontal cortex is fully developed, you still have dysphoria, you have money and are willing to pay for your own health care, you have my blessing. Go for it. If you want to add body parts, subtract body parts, it's your body.
No one wants to rush teenagers into transitioning if that's not what's going to be the best outcome for them, right? I just feel that a lot of the kind of moral panic over this is overstated.
It sounds like you think that she's exaggerating the...
I think I agree with that. I think it is very serious when it is done, but I think it's very rare that kids under the age of 18 are getting like some major surgery done. I don't even know the numbers on that. So I'll change my mind in a second if people can show me evidence that it's in the hundreds of thousands of teenagers in the United States getting major surgeries done, hysterectomies, vasectomies. But I think it's still very rare, right?
Risks, and that adds to a climate of fear around something that society still seems hesitant to embrace.
Yeah.
When I was talking to Natalie about this idea of exaggerating real risks in a way that might distort them,
I asked her if she felt the same way about Rowling's concerns around self-ID and gender recognition certificates, and what they could mean for single-sex spaces.
I mean, first of all, she says, there's this fear, men are just going to be able to come barging into bathrooms with those certificates. Do you need a certificate to enter a bathroom now? That's not how bathrooms work. Like, to me, this is a sort of imagined fear-generated scenario that doesn't really line up with the actual experience of people in bathrooms.
Well, it's for those 6-foot trans women who have a 5 o'clock shadow. Like, too bad we didn't have a machine that can tell you with 99% confidence that you're transgender, that you're really transgender. Too bad that machine doesn't exist, where you can actually get diagnosed as being transgender and then have a little stamped card and say, look, hey women, I know I look manly, and I know that you think I have a penis, and I do, but I honestly have a brain of a woman, and I'll never rape you. Although women can still rape women, so I don't know. And here's my proof. Here's my card. But yeah, I think Natalie's right here, and I think she's going to say this. If you look very womanly, nobody's going to know the difference, and they're not going to have this fear in them. And again, here's another point. Whether a person will actually go into a woman's bathroom and commit a rape or, stare at women's boobs in a change room or whatever is irrelevant. It's the perception of these women, right? These real women, biological women. By the way, when I say real woman, I mean born biological woman. They're going to fear, rather incorrectly or correctly. Now, even if it's a rational fear, do we not take into consideration people's irrational fears? Maybe not.
Right. People identify your gender based on how you look. I mean, I've been using women's bathrooms for 5 years. No one has ever approached me about it, right? So generating a paranoia about men in women's bathrooms is sort of this purely imaginative scenario where, there's going to be perverts in bathrooms who will face no consequences because of, sexual assault is still illegal. And it's not really clear to me how much protection a certificate gives someone.
Well, there's this... The reason why I think a lot of male perverts don't go into female bathrooms today, at least in public, is because in public there's men and women walking around outside the bathrooms. Like, if I'm at Disneyland and my daughter is going into a bathroom and I'm waiting outside for her, and I see a 6'2", 6'1" guy with a 5 o'clock shadow, wearing a dress, going into the bathroom after my daughter goes in, I am not going to be comfortable. I won't, because I am a pattern-seeking mammal who knows that the vast, 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 vast majority of rapes are done by men to women. I'm not going to feel comfortable. Now, do my feelings not count? Huh? They don't count? As a protective father, they don't count? I don't know exactly what I would do, but there's a good probability that I would go in, at least to the door, and say, hey, you, get out. Or I would find the closest security guard, let them know what's going on. And I dare say most, I would say I'm typical. I'm a typical father. I would say most fathers would do the same thing as me. So if you're going to be a trans woman going into a woman's bathroom, you better look like one. Otherwise, you're going to have problems.
When you talk about the danger of the asking questions idea or seeing it as indirect bigotry. And
you're just bigoted towards bearded women, Doug. No, I am not bigoted towards bearded women. I have many Mennonite aunts with beards, or at least mustaches.
Interesting aspect of this part of it is that, in the first chapter of the first Harry Potter book, Uncle Vernon keeps yelling at Harry over and over again, stop asking questions. And when I asked Rowling about why she started the book this way. She said that from the start, the book was anti-authoritarian.
Oh, sorry.
That-
Sorry, I was muted. I just said that wouldn't it be great if there was a law in the United States that every woman had to have a concealed Glock in their purse or in their satchel? I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? I think the number of rapes and violence towards women would just plummet, right? Because any guy who attempts anything, the woman takes out this big Glock that she can barely hold. The guy would be scared, like she doesn't even know how to use it. It could go off even accidentally, like the guy's just going to run. And then I said, I'm Pinecreek, I'll be running for Senate. Make it law that every woman has to have a concealed carry license.
She understood starts when people are discouraged from voicing their doubts. And you are someone who's been vocal about the ways that the internet has become a place where authoritarian behavior is on the rise. Like, do you see what she's worried about?
I think that to be authoritarian, you have to be able to leverage authority. And trans people are in a weak position, right?
Yeah, it's not the trans people who have the authority. It's the white liberal women. Am I right? It's mostly white liberal women. Am I wrong?
I don't see like this trans big brother.
White liberal cis women.
That you can't question. Like that's a very melodramatic and self-pitying way of framing this, that I understand why to people it feels like, oh, the mob is attacking me. Well, I don't know. Is that the mob is it can be vicious and unreasonable and unsympathetic and unnuanced. Absolutely. But to me, that's fundamentally different from Big Brother.
In her J.K. Rowling video, Natalie talks about the way that some trans people wield power online, including why that power is sometimes wielded so fiercely.
A lot of extremely online trans people really don't have a strong sense of conviction and their own identity.
There it is. I've been saying this for years. It's an identity well, it's of course an identity problem. But this is why I view the trans issue as more of like, if someone were to come up to me, I'm trying to figure out a tactful way of saying this. If someone who I perceive to be, let's say, 25 years old comes up to me and wants to talk about trans issues, but they say from the onset, please treat me like a child because my identity is fragile. I don't have a strong conviction of my identity, just like a child doesn't. I'm still trying to figure out who I am. So please talk to me with that mindset. You know what? I would appreciate that if they just came out and said that. In other words, don't treat me like an adult. Treat me like a child here. Be very careful with the words you choose, the questions you ask, because I'm fragile. I'd appreciate that honesty. And you know what? I would give in to that. I'd say, yeah, okay, fine. I will walk on eggshells. I'll be very careful in the word choice I choose. But please know that someone who knows who they are, is secure in who they are, you notice I can just talk freely with them. I can ask them anything. Who cares about my motivations? Who cares about my intent? And we can just talk. But you can't do that with some people, apparently.
Which is why they need constant external validation to prop them up.
Constant external validation to prop them up. This is what we do with children. It's like, you can do it, Billy. Just work a little harder. You can get your homework done. You can win this race. Just keep exercising, whatever. We got your back. Go, Billy. We need constant external validation. This is the definition of a non-adult, in my opinion. If you need constant external validation, you haven't reached peak maturity. I'll say it that way.
They need to constantly be told that they're valid, that they really are the gender that they say they are. And if someone even obliquely threatens or questions their fragile self-concept, they lash out. And for some of those trans people, canceling celebrities on Twitter is the one kind of power they have.
Yeah, the one kind of power they have. Wow, I agree with Natalie here. from ContraPoints. I think she's spot on. This is why there is this lashing out, this cancellation. It is a way for them to get some type of power, some type of feeling good about themselves, because they don't know who they are. They need this external validation.
Plus, a lot of have people been abusive, disproportionate, out of line in reacting against J.K. Rowling? Of course. Do I endorse people saying like violent or abusive, cruel things? No. I've been the target of a lot of that myself, but I also kind of understand what people are mad about.
Yeah, there's Christian David I recognize from my other channel. Doug, how is it we agree on so much? I want to point out, David, that there is this perception about atheists that if you're an atheist, you're going to believe X, Y, and Z. And part of me feels good that I might be blowing the mind of some Christians watching right now, that we are aligned on this, that you're a Christian, I'm not, I'm an atheist, and we can agree on some of these causal factors and these identity issues. I think, and as we'll hear, and I've already said, there's many things I agree with Natalie, who's transgender as well. And I think this is the key to having fruitful conversations. Find points of agreement, find common goals, and then when it comes to areas where we disagree, we're more likely to hear each other.
Mm-hmm. I definitely hear you. As I'm thinking back, of course, I was in Westboro when the discussion about...
At the end of our conversation, I told Natalie a bit more about my own story, how it was people willing to engage with me, even when I was saying really cruel things.
Yes.
That was so transformative. And how I wonder, as uncomfortable as those conversations can be, if they're really the best path to progress that we have.
Yes. Excellent point, Megan. See, Megan was the type of woman who says you're going to hell, God hates you, if you're a faggot, you're going to hell. And there were still some atheists, I think her husband's an atheist maybe, or agnostic, at the time saying, hey, you're saying very negative things, hurtful things to people, but I'm still willing to have a conversation with you. And she left this cult basically because of a conversation she had on Twitter. Isn't that amazing? So if you're a type of atheist who says, I'm not even going to talk to these fundamentalist conservative Christians because they're just like bigoted, transphobe, homophobic, racist, like I'm not going to talk to a Trump supporter because they're just bigoted. Like, what's wrong with you? Conversations is how you change people's minds. And it goes both ways. That Trump supporter, you might have these ideas in your head about them, and then after an hour-long conversation, say, you know what? There's a couple of things I agree with this guy on, and vice versa.
Over the last decade, when it comes to things like opposition to same-sex marriage, so many people have been persuaded and now support it. And I asked her whether one of the reasons she was willing to speak publicly about these issues was because in a pluralistic society, actually having the conversation is how effective change is made.
Yes.
They serve a purpose that is ultimately good, even though we wish there was a...
He's Jewish. Oh. She married a Jewish fella, did she? I can understand that. I love the Jews. You can't say that's racist or bigoted if I say the word love in front of the Jews, right? I mean, how can that be bad?
A more ideal route.
Well, I think that realistically, that is how acceptance, that is the trajectory. Like, I'm not under any illusions about what it's going to take for trans people to be accepted. I think that we're probably 20 years away. And I think that what it is going to take is people simply habituating to a world that includes trans people. And my guess is that once that happens, once that habituation happens, it becomes much less of this hypothetical, new, scary, invasive thing. And it becomes something that's sort of accepted in life. And that will happen with trans people. Trans people are not going anywhere. You're not going to be able to get rid of us. I think that once this becomes normal, it will become to most people a bit more of an embarrassment that they behave.
Yeah, I think most people don't care about trans people. I think the main concerns are transitioning for children, the bathroom issue, and the sports issue. I think that's it. So I think most people in the United States, if you want to identify as the opposite sex or gender, go for it. Just don't start taking the uterus out of girls and taking the penis off boys and having men compete in women's sports and the bathroom thing. I mean, those are the main things.
This way during these years. And I certainly do believe in having the conversation. I mean, if I consider myself, I think I'm having the conversation right now.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. Again, I just want you to know how much I appreciate that, because
I think I'm willing to have the conversation because I feel that I often have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I also hope that people sort of understand the reason why a lot of trans people might not be super eager to politely answer every question they have about, isn't giving you healthcare dangerous for children? Isn't allowing you into bathrooms going to leave women vulnerable to rape? Like, it takes patience to answer these questions and to not feel insulted or attacked. I mean, I am willing to do it to a certain extent because I know that I have to, right? Because unfortunately, the progress of trans people is in its still fairly early stages.
Mm-hmm. And I hope you understand how deeply I know this in my bones, because when I think about the people who engaged me on Twitter back in the day, the ones who were patient and showed me grace when I displayed the kind of absolutely horrible, cruel behavior that I did, it honestly shocks me. So anyway,
Yeah,
I completely understand that, and I appreciate it.
I do sometimes worry that I'm somewhat losing my ability to have that kind of tranquil, forgiving quality, because you can get worn down doing this for too long.
Yeah, I can empathize with that. Especially if you're on YouTube creating content and active in the comment section, you can get worn down. I mean, at some point you just become so indifferent. There's many, and some of you have probably seen this. Whenever someone writes long comments and then expects me to engage with it, I'll just type okay, period. It's my way of saying I don't care. And it's just so much work. By the way, if you write a comment that's more than 2 or 3 sentences that are not run-on sentences, I mean, odds are I'm not going to even read it.
Sometimes I worry that I guess I usually avoid these conversations lately because I honestly kind of have gotten a bit burnt out on it, but I do still feel this kind of, why am I here? I think J.K. Rowling, I read all those books when I was a kid. There's a lingering emotional, there's part of me that actually still cares.
See, I can't empathize with this. I can't empathize loving an author so much that they can disappoint you with having a different political view. I'm trying to think of an example where I could empathize with this. I think this is a real problem, that when you put certain people on pedestals, your favorite actor, your favorite musician, your favorite author, and then they say something to disappoint you, why did you put them up on this pedestal in the first place in something other than what you liked them for? You're basically asking to be hurt emotionally. Think of your dad. How does that help? My dad has said some very terrible things to me. But I still look back on on how he raised me and how he provided for me. I mean, everything's relative, right? But I had a really good dad. I mean, he was there for me, he provided for me and my family, my sisters. He taught me so many things. But he's definitely said things that I've disagreed with. But I don't, it's not like, oh, I'm going to now not love you or say you're my dad anymore because you said X. I'm sure there's some things he could say that I would do that, but you know, comparing for Natalie, like Natalie going into tears now about J.K. Rowling is nothing close to your own parent. My guess is Natalie from ContraPoints has never, ever met J.K. Rowling face to face. Maybe, but I doubt it. And if so, like, what was that, a 5-10 minute conversation? At a book signing or something?
Sorry. There's part of me that still cares what she thinks, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If there's anybody in the live stream chat who's heard me say something that you strongly disagree with and you've cried about it like this, about me, like, stop it. Like, you should not have had me on that pedestal in the first place. Just say, I like Doug here, don't like Doug there. That's the end of it. I don't know. I just can't relate. Maybe we're just different.
What would you want to say to J.K. Rowling?
I just kind of hope she could try to see why so many trans people are angry and hurt by this. And I realize that means asking for a second to, like...
Yeah, but the thing is, angry and hurt through disagreement. And it's not even... Well, I'm sure J.K. Rowling has said things that they disagree, but a lot of times she poses it in terms of questions. But being angry or hurt to someone because you disagree with them on one or two things. But this gets down to their identity, right? It's many trans people, their identity is so fragile that when they hear any type of pushback, they will get hurt. But I'll just say it the way I think. I mean, I think that's a them problem, not a J.K. Rowling problem. They haven't become adults yet. They haven't matured yet to know who they are.
Leave her own position of feeling hurt and threatened. That's what she says that she wants to do. And to me, what doing that would look like would be understanding why people who are sort of being constantly rejected and humiliated by our families, by the government, who are losing our access to healthcare or being threatened with it.
See, I agree with the family part. Like, if your own family reject you and say, we want nothing to do with you, I understand that hurt. But the government, strangers on the internet, that has to stop. Like, if you expect society to accept and love you, that has to stop. Especially love. Except, I agree with his terms of, they shouldn't hurt you physically and kill you. But no, I'll even go in terms of like. If you're a trans person listening right now, I think a lot of you even agree with me. Like, you got to stop this whole idea that society has to like you. Who cares if people like you or not? I mean, strangers on the internet like you or not, or strangers in society like you or not. But the family part, I get. I'm sure that's very hurtful when people you love and care about deeply reject you. Have you considered that it's not just their identity, but also how laws are being put up for vote by the hundreds Yeah, I don't get this, Ray. Most of these laws that are currently being put up are about sports, bathrooms, what else? Sports, bathrooms, and surgery for minors. And of all the laws that I've seen, which is not many, but I've skimmed a few of them, so far all of them I agree with. And I think a lot of trans people even agree with, if kind of forced to, talk about it, maybe off camera. A lot of trans people are against trans women in women's sports. A lot of trans women or trans people in general agree that, hey, when it comes to bathroom, we do have to take into account the perceptions, the feelings of biological women. And when it comes to surgery, I think a lot of people agree, like, we shouldn't just take, if someone says, I'm a woman and they were born a man and I want my penis taken off and they're 15 years old. No, like, I think most people in the United States would say, no, that's not good. Or a uterus. So this law thing and my rights being taken away, I don't get that. What rights do trans people have that I don't have? Like, really be specific. What has been taken away? The rights come from people found in the Constitution. Most of it's privileges, not rights. Healthcare is not a right in the United States. Do I have to repeat that? Healthcare is not a right in the United States. You do not have a right to healthcare. If everybody in society, if you're sick and everybody in society says, we're not going to help you, guess what? You're going to die. You don't have a right to have healthcare in the United States. Now you can say, well, there should be that right. Okay, that's a different conversation. But as it stands today, you do not have the right to healthcare. And you do not have the right to go into any bathroom you want. You have the right to petition, to have a religion or no religion, to freedom of speech. Those are your rights. Which every citizen, you have the right to vote over the age of 18. You have the right to run for public office if you're a U.S. citizen. But this whole idea of you have the right to be loved and liked and accepted? No! You do not have the right to be loved, accepted. Then make them rights. Well, Matesh, this is why we have conversations and arguments and back and forths. Yes, humans can change rights, they can remove rights, they can add rights. I think this is, a little bit longer.
Who are kind of just like fighting for a basic ability to participate in society. Like,
what can you not participate except for, I guess, trans sports is probably the thing, and bathrooms?
Why we might feel hurt and betrayed by her sort of contributing to like fear about us.
Yeah, the one thing that I can maybe kind of push back on myself is that if you're a trans person and you want to be a school teacher in elementary school, and you want the right to be a teacher, again, a certain occupation is not even a right. You don't have the right to do the job you want to do. Like, if nobody hires you, you don't have the right, you don't have that right. So if you are a trans person and you look like something other than you say you are, and parents pull their kids out of that classroom, you just got to deal with it. I mean, you don't have the right to be a teacher in that school if none of the parents want you there. You do not have the right to be accepted. I don't have the right to be accepted. Here's a piece of advice from a 52-year-old Just got to accept the things you can't control. Life is a game, and you got to play it. You got to adapt. Should doctors and pharmacists be able to say they will not treat a trans person? If you don't have money, then they can say, no, we're not going to treat you. Are you asking, I know you kept the word right out of there. So the whole idea of should, like becomes like a moral type question, right? I would say that if I was a doctor and a trans person needed a prescription for a certain drug, like, I don't know, they have high cholesterol and they want to get the cholesterol down, so they need a statin. Yeah, the doctor should do that. But they don't have to. Just like they don't have to do it with me. What are the rules of the game of life, Doug? The rules of the game is that, number one, the game's unfair. Number two, if you want change, you got to convince people. Number three, if you come across as someone who is not willing to dialogue and converse and talk, you're probably not going to make the change that you want if you disagree with certain things in society. Number four, there will always be people who don't accept you, who will hate you, who will not like you. And you got to learn to live with it. What other rules are there? Number five, you're going to die. You're going to die. And that will be it. That's a big rule of the game. What are the rules of the game of life? Number six, happiness is overrated. That sometimes you're going to have to do things that you don't like in order to maybe someday do things you do like. Should was in terms of allowable discrimination. Yeah, to me that's a dependent type question. Like, should a doctor take a penis off a 15-year-old? I say no. 28-year-old? Maybe. Again, this is what society has to decide. So discrimination is not bad by default. Discrimination is not bad by default. That's another rule. Discrimination, rule number 7, discrimination is not bad. We discriminate all the time. Okay, let's get to ContraPoints has a video here. She talks about Vaush and other things. How can I want to show the live stream chat and ContraPoints at the same time. I know this bothers some people because it's not perfect. Like, yeah. Where do I want to start this? Here, maybe?
About discernment, about how a person can ever know if they're standing up for what's right or joining a moral panic. I think you'll be surprised by the thoughts she shares. Megan, I was not surprised.
I know I won't ever regret having stood up on this issue, ever.
The podcast released new episodes weekly, and whenever Megan was challenged about the blatant one-sidedness,
Megan would respond, "Oh, you just think that because you haven't listened to the whole podcast yet. Maybe you should reserve judgment. Much more of other perspectives is coming. Make sure to tune in next week."
Yeah, this whole one-sidedness thing. I get this often too. Like, Doug, why don't you beat up on the right more, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, I do it sometimes, but I admit most of the time I'm kind of beating up on the left because I disagree with the left. Like, it's no fun to talk about people you already agree with. And how do you beat up on them if you agree with them? But yeah, if the criticism is that Megan has this ulterior motive, so what? If Megan's motive is to bring up that people who disagree with J.K. Rowling should be open to having civil conversations and dialogue about where they disagree and why, and finding common ground, oh, that's a terrible thing, isn't it? Or that J.K. Rowling has been unfairly treated as a witch. Yeah, come out and say it. I agree with ContraPoints here.
More bombshell revelations to come. Well, I've listened to the whole podcast now.
You beat up on Christians, so you're beating on the right. Hey, good point, man in charge. I actually probably beat up on the right more than the left if you count my religious channel, which mostly targets conservative evangelicals, who are like 90% right-leaners, if not 100. So there you go. I'm fair and balanced. I'm better than Fox News.
And I truly do not think that anyone with basic media comprehension skills could come away from this thinking that the main intent was anything other than to portray J.K. Rowling as the martyr of an unjust, what's the word? Witch hunt? This is the obvious implication of the podcast from the first words to the very last.
I agree.
And of course,
I would agree and say that's not bad.
Rowling does literally get the last word. The final episode concludes with this.
There are more important things in this world than being popular. And that doesn't mean it's more important to me to be right. It means it's more important to me to do the right thing.
Why would you end on that note? Why would anything about this podcast be the way it is?
Because J.K. Rowling thinks she's right. Megan Phelps thinks that J.K. Rowling's right. In general on this issue, especially about conversations and canceling and talking and civilness and all that. They think they're right. And I think part of you thinks they're right too.
If Megan didn't fundamentally believe that J.K. Rowling is in the right.
I don't regret it because I did the right thing.
Like, there really is no other reasonable way to interpret this.
I honestly don't know why ContraPoints is making a big deal of this. That's just obvious. And if that makes you feel bad, then feel bad.
So I wish that she would just be honest. If you believe that J.K. Rowling is...
Yeah, I get this. Sorry I'm stopping this so frequently, but I got so many thoughts on this. Because I get this often, too, on my religious channel. Like, it's obvious, Doug, you think you're right and they're wrong. These Christians are wrong. And you ask these loaded questions when it's obvious that you're trying to get them to doubt. This is why I don't know, years and years ago, put all my cards on the table. My goal is to get Christians to doubt Christianity and other religions. Now, they can stay Christians or whatever, especially if they need it. But and I've also said this, my goal is to lead you to hell. Like, I've been so transparent. I tell people, I'm asking this question, I'm giving you this hypothetical, and it's a trap. I'm letting you know it's a trap. Walk into it freely now, please. Don't be scared. This is why I've changed, is because of people like ContraPoints saying, oh, it just bothers me so much. You just don't come out and honestly say your motives. Okay, I'll give you my motives. You got them. Does that change anything? Are you going to stop talking to me or listening to me just because you know my motives are something you might not like?
Misunderstood victim of a witch hunt? Then just say that. Make the argument you want to make. Don't crouch and hide behind this disavowal, this obfuscating veil of just asking questions. Don't rely on innuendo and framing and lachrymose Gregorian chanting to make your point, while coyly denying you have any kind of agenda beyond.
I would just ask ContraPoints, well, why does it bother you so much? Like, since you're convinced that this is what's really going on, that it's a series of showing J.K. Rowling to be in the right, and Megan Phelps being right, and a lot of the people in the trans issue, whatever, being wrong. Like, why does it bother you? They think they're right. They think you're wrong. Who cares? Now let's have a conversation and talk about it. Why are you so concerned about these hidden agendas that are not so hidden?
I just believe in conversation. I don't know. I just find this a slippery and dishonest way to argue. But if you happen to be a fan of slippery and dishonest arguments, you're in luck, because there is more where that came from. This video...
What is that? Okay, Vaush's name comes up here, and I found it interesting. And then I'll open up the room if anybody wants to talk to me. What's this?
I've always been happy to acknowledge that angry trans people on Twitter sometimes take things too far. Things like death threats or misogynistic insults, I don't support that, and I've called it out in the past. Like when the leftist streamer Vaush, drama alert, who is not trans, tweeted at J.K. Rowling, "Women be quieter and start apologizing challenge."
Whoa. Whoa, in a vacuum, that seems kind of misogynistic, doesn't it? All J.K. Rowling had to do was shut the F up, and she could have been almost uncritically beloved for like a century. See, this is the difference between someone who leans left and someone who leans right. You can tell the left brain needs to be loved. All she had to do was be quiet, and she would be loved for 100 years. Maybe she doesn't care if she's loved for 100 years. How could she not care? I care about being loved. So J.K. Rowling ought to be cared about being loved. Ugh. Women be quieter and start apologizing challenge.
I called him out, tweeting, "Doing edgy ironic misogyny while defending trans people."
Do you have conversations with gender people? What does that mean? Transgender people? Look at my live stream from two live streams ago. I had 2 transgender women come on.
Magnifies the grain of truth in what TERFs say about there being misogyny in trans activism. I tweeted that because I recognize that if people who are claiming to speak for you are doing so in a misogynistic way, and if you let that slide, you're going to wake up one day to find that you're in a misogynistic movement. Of course, Vaush...
This is why I'm against drag queens, by the way, because I find that misogynistic.
Took the criticism really well, explaining that actually, I just didn't understand the complex tactical arguments for the moral necessity of being misogynistic to J.K. Rowling. And then he accused me of cancel culturing him, while at the same time literally telling his followers to publicly shame me.
The more of you are in the replies being like, that's not what's happening right here. Like, this is necessary, okay? Publicly shame her into changing her mind on this.
Then bringing up my past struggle with addiction.
Move you off this site and into... I don't want to bring up the substance abuse.
So that pretty much...
Speaking of hidden agendas, I don't want to bring up her substance abuse. Although I just did by saying that.
Confirmed to me that Vaush doesn't actually care about advocating for trans people and just uses trans rights as a pretext to act like a fucking dingus. I won't tell you to publicly shame him though, because unlike Vaush, I would never sink to that. The point I'm trying to make is, I have no...
Yeah, I did interview, or actually I was mostly quiet, but a transgender person came on with Mike Winger like 4 or 5 years ago. And I just sat back and watched mostly. That was an interesting conversation. If anybody hasn't seen it, you can search Mike Winger transgender maybe, Pinecreek. Put those 3 words together, you might find it.
qualms about calling out people on my side whenever they go too far or cross a line, or do stupid tweets and then mansplain to me about how I don't understand tactical misogyny. Idiot. But the same cannot be said of J.K. Rowling.
Does the term mansplain apply to her? Can she be mansplained too? Can a man... I better stop.
I have never once seen her call out any of the bigotry and abusiveness that is absolutely rampant in the gender-critical movement. There's a great video called J.K. Rowling's New Friends by YouTuber Sean that exposes the dishonesty of framing this conflict as meek, concerned feminists versus the abusive trans mob. A framing that the witch trials of J.K. Rowling...
By the way, and for the record, I think this trans mob are not the transgender people. They're not the mob. It's the, I would say, typically white cis women who are more the mobsters in general. My experience with transgender people has been very good. I've interviewed or talked to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least 5 transgender people in the last couple years. Very nice, cordial conversations. It's the guilt-ridden, these left-leaning do-gooders who have no hope, meaning, and purpose in their lives. They got to find it. And supporting these, what they view as these weak people who need my help. Those are the real mobsters you got to look out for. Okay, I think that's enough. Doug using trans-inclusive language. That's crazy. Doug fears Sam Cedars takes. Who's Sam Cedars? Don't even know him. That name sounds familiar, though. Who is Sam Cedar? Does anybody want to talk to me? She's transplaining. Ah, yes, not mansplaining. Transplaining. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah, see, I know, Bacon, you're mad at me. But look at this picture. Hang on. Here's my... let me defend myself. I am a mammal. I am an animal. I see this. I think female. Even though I know, based on her testimony, that she was born a man, a male. But I'm just going with what I see. Now, there's other pictures of her where she looks like a guy. And I bet you I would probably say he. Like, here's a picture of her that looks like a he. Oh, no, that's not her. Here's ContraPoints. Like, this is a bad picture of ContraPoints. Trump looks very brown here. He's usually orange. Anyhow, we shouldn't bring up Trump. Yeah, like this picture here. She looks like a she. I know that she was born with a penis, but she looks like a she here. But here, a little less. Here, even less so. Well, I don't know. I bet you if I found pictures on the internet, I could find pictures where she, I would say he. Okay, let me open up the room. I want people who disagree with me on something to call in, or disagree with ContraPoints, or J.K. Rowling, or Megan Phelps, whoever. I don't want an agreement. Agreement's boring. But I do want civility. Because I know there's a lot of left-leaning liberals here, and if you're not civil, they're going to be offended and leave. Okay, rooms. Oh, I didn't post. Oh, yeah, I did. Oh, yeah, it's there. Rooms open. I can never get my coloring right. I have coloring dysphoria. As a black man, I look at my white face and I just feel terrible. Is transitioning to blackface a bad thing? What do you think, Jerome? If I have trans dysphoria, if I identify as a black man and I want to do some type of medical procedure to have blackface, black body, is that bad? Put up a poll. What do you want me to poll? Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, Sneed. If you really think about the argument against blackface can be used against woman face. Like drag queens, for example. Ask about Justin Blackface Trudeau. Nah. I'm an American citizen, Lobar Craig. I look at Canada and I go, phew. Those Canadians with their socialistic, communist, non-free speech ideas. They're weak. I just started watching your content again after several years. I am on the left, but mostly agree with what you're saying. Well, look at that. And Andre Bradshaw? I'm glad you said mostly and not entirely. Because if you agreed with everything I said, then maybe you shouldn't watch my channel. Go watch channels where you disagree. And you can, although there's not too many channels where you disagree and you can interact with the content creator. Because people, unlike, like there's on the left, there's Destiny, there's Vaush, who actively engage with their live stream. Who else is there? Like not even Pac-Man. Does Pac-Man do it? He's more or less does his own thing and then the chat's going, but maybe he interacts once in a while. Bottom surgery for hey Uber, from what I know, Uber would imply that you don't need any surgery down there. No, not identifying as blackface, identifying as a black man. But because I have this trans dysphoria, I think transitioning is required. And I'm over the age of 28. So my prefrontal cortex is developed. I mean, if a doctor, hey Ray, are you still here? If a doctor denied me surgery to get blackface because I'm transracial, I mean, should a doctor do that? See what I'm getting at? There is no perfect left-wing social media commentator. Well, that's because there's no perfect person. Yeah, I tend to like Destiny more than Vaush. Vaush to me is like, I don't know. It's like if you were to take Vaush in your two hands and squeeze them, like a lot of dirty oil would come out. He just seems a little greasy to me. Yeah, transracial. You didn't know I'm transracial, Ray? I identify as a black man. So, should a doctor deny me the right to transition to a black man by doing, you know what happened to Michael Jackson? He went from black to white. I want to go from white to black. I don't know the surgery involved with that, but I'm sure there's a way to increase my melanin to get me to look like a black man. Maybe get me an afro. Yeah. I already have some attributes of the black man, but I want more. Oh, Ray, yes.
Hey. Good morning.
Good morning.
Or afternoon. So, since you brought up the transracial thing in context of should you be treated?
Yeah, because you asked that question earlier, and that can be applied to transracial, right?
No. You think you missed my post after you noticed it. I was pointing out that I was referring to treatments that you treat somebody else for, and then deny treatment, that same treatment for somebody who's trans, just because, oh, my religion doesn't allow me to, I think what you're doing is wrong. In the same ilk of, I can't do something for a gay person because, well, you're going to hell, and I don't want to be part of that.
Okay.
That type.
Can you get an example of someone having their penis removed?
I wasn't thinking about those treatments. I was thinking about just normal, everyday.
Oh.
I don't want to treat you.
Yeah, no, to me, yeah, they should. I mean.
Okay, so we're in agreement that the should in that context is proper.
Yeah, well, someone could say they should not but I say they should.
Okay, good. I am in agreement with that. Now we can go to the transracial thing.
Okay. Like basically what you're asking is if someone has a migraine and they need a prescription and the doctor says, "Oh, you're a trans woman. I'm not going to give you migraine medication." Yeah, I think that's bad.
Right. Or how about a vasectomy?
Vasectomy? Yeah, that's the same thing.
Same thing. Good. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Trevi.
Oh, yeah. The transracial thing, I've heard that argument like a couple weeks ago from a friend. I was thinking to myself, why does that bother me that there's something about that seems different and silly to me. And I think it's because when I think of a trans person, I think it's plausible that there's something biological going on that drives that. Could be a different size structure of a portion of your brain. It could be a portion of your brain producing something, a protein or something, in amounts that are different. I don't know what it is, but I can. Oh shit! I'm frozen. Can you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I can plausibly. I can lean toward. There's a biological explanation, a biological force going on. Transracial. I don't know about a black hormone. Or
see, okay, I get what you're saying, and a part of me resonates with it. But I think it's a matter of definitions, because when you ask a trans person to explain to you what exactly is this dysphoria, like what does it feel like, what is it, and so they start explaining. Well, I just feel like, so let's say they're born with a penis. XY, and they say, well, I just feel like a girl. I feel like a woman. I've known but what does that mean to feel like a woman? What does that mean? And I've asked this question of many, not many, but a couple of people, and their answer is, I don't know what that means. With that Gabrielle person, Gabrielle said, well, I wanted to wear a dress. I wanted to play with girl toys. Was that what it means to be a girl, to play with dolls, wear dresses? So if you take that and apply it to transracial, what does it mean to be transracial? I just feel like a black man. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. I just want to listen to rap music. I just want to have a car that goes up and down. Whatever it might mean, was that what it means to be a black man? And so I think you can use any argument you make about the transgender thing, you can make about transracial And there's even examples of people like this is just not, I'm just not making up a hypothetical. There's people in the world who actually honestly, sincerely say, I identify as a race other than myself. And there's, I forget the woman's name, but
yeah, I know who you're talking about, who actually became a political leader for a local, was it NAACP or something like that? I don't know. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So and then when it comes to transitioning, like the argument becomes even more clear. Like if I sincerely, and I don't, but let's say I sincerely said, I identify as a black man and I want to transition to, so people will view me as a black man and accept me as a black man and see me as a black man. Well, I need to get darker skin. I need to put on blackface. And most people in society would be against that right now in the United States. But one could make the argument, well, why can't we apply that to putting on woman face or man face? Like there's people born biological women who take testosterone so they can grow a beard. Why is that okay and not okay to put on blackface?
I still can't get past there. I see no biological impetus. I see no plausible biological impetus. I see a psychological impetus, obviously, for the transracial thing, which I assume is a pretty uncommon thing. Like, okay, I feel oppressed, or they tell me these stories and I empathize, and they take it to the next step. They want to be part of it.
Okay, but what if there is no biological basis and the transgender thing is all psychological?
Then I would be on your side. I'd be like, okay, there's less. I'm trying to try to tie your argument there toward the more extreme treatments. I'd say there's less, probably, less reason to allow any extreme treatments for something like that.
So what if like you and I are very manly men, right? Like you can't get more manly than us.
Please.
But let's say
nobody thinks of manly men when they look.
Like let's say I was born very feminine. I mean, just naturally, my personality type is more attributed to what society views as feminine traits like empathy, non-risk taking, and let's say I'm even gay. I mean, and society, the culture I was raised in kind of frowns upon gays, but they don't frown upon women. And so here's a way for me, for my psychology to make sense of the world by saying, I'm not really a man. Because if I am a man, then that makes me gay. And if I am a man, I'm a feminine man. And, society doesn't really appreciate that so much. And so if I just become a woman, all my problems are solved.
Social pressure.
Yeah. And so that can explain transgenderism.
I would say, sure, for a group of transgenders, absolutely, I agree that can happen. I wouldn't necessarily tie being effeminate to being gay, because I've met people as I grew up I was thinking like, that's very effeminate, but then I'm seeing them with women, and I'm thinking, okay, they could be, there's no association necessarily there, or they're bi. So I don't know, I'm not quite willing to tie that together, but that's a tangent.
Like my math professor in my undergraduate, I took calculus 1 and 2. A guy teaching me math comes to university one day wearing a dress, and everybody freaked out. Like, what's going on here? Nobody said anything, to him or anything, but comes to university wearing a dress, makeup, out of the blue, and nobody says anything. I graduated, and then I think 10 years went by or something, commit suicide in his garage.
Okay.
And so I'm saying this because you might be right that I'm saying this against the psychological thing, that it's still psychological, but that there's something deep in the psyche that this dysphoria is real. They can't just stop it by talking it out. Yeah, that's why I'm bringing this up. And so I'm acknowledging that it's a real phenomenon that people struggle with, but I would still say that it is psychological.
I won't disagree that there's a psychological component to it. If I were to make a Venn diagram of transracial versus transgender, I would see overlap, but I can't make it 100%. I don't lean that way on that. I see overlap, but I see there's just too much possibility that there's a non-psychological.
Well, even look at heterosexual versus homosexual. Like, it's not a clear-cut two boxes there either, right?
No, because there's people who are bisexual.
Yeah. But even us as manly men, which you can't get more manly than us. I mean, there's at least 0.1% of us are kind of gay, right? Me and you.
Sorry, what?
There's about 0.1% in us that's gay.
The gay percent.
Yeah. Like you're 0.1% gay, right, Ray?
I don't know, but I do know this, and I don't know why I'm thinking this. But because of your religious channel. First thing I thought of when you said that was there's a feminine side to God in the Bible.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the Holy Spirit's the comforter, right? The Holy Spirit's like the mother that holds the baby.
I forgot where I saw the passages, but I was reading God, a biography, and there was a whole chapter on the feminine side of God. He's got two sides to him, and he cited different stories in the Bible to back it up. So, yeah. So even God might be a little gay.
But if I called into In the Line, that show? If I
actually should say feminine, not gay. Feminine does not mean gay.
No. But I was just going to say that if I call into The Line, that transatlantic call-in show, I would ask them about this transracial argument, because I think every argument, I think they're going to respond like you did, that it just doesn't feel right. But I don't think.
No, I didn't say it doesn't feel right.
I know you didn't use those words, but it seems to you there is more of a genetic component or something. But my point would be that every argument a trans person could make in support, I could make with transracial.
You made that clear, and you can have that and still not be identical.
Yeah, well, it's a different thing. Yeah, it's not identical, but it's
right. So I'm trying to point out epistemology here. You can have 100% overlap on those things and still have a completely different cause.
And the thing is, if we're talking evidence-based, we still don't have, there's not a transgender gene, just like there's not a homosexual gene.
Agreed. However, I think both of these, from what I can tell, have been in human civilization or societies or communities for forever.
Well, they called them different things.
Right.
I'm still not clear what really, a transvestite versus a trans person,
I assume vestite is something to do with clothing.
Right. But so often when you, at least with Gabrielle, who I talked to, that is how she thought she was actually a woman, because she desired to dress up in other clothing. And I'm going, well, why aren't you just a transvestite then?
Sure. I can't say that there's nothing like what you're saying. I'm just saying there's just because there's, like I said just a second ago, just because there's 100%, you can map that 1-to-1, doesn't mean there's more on one than the other. In other words, you see what I mean. It's, if you were to just think of it in terms of a Venn diagram, two circles, they don't completely overlap, or one could be inside the other.
Well, careful in your language here, but
like a turducken. Transducken.
When you, before you go, because I got someone else waiting, positive thumbs up, thumbs down on J.K. Rowling. What's your personal opinion of her?
Oh, I didn't see the Megan Phelps thing. I only saw the.
What do you mean you didn't see it? It's on audio only, but you've been listening to my show religiously, right?
No.
Oh. I've gone through every chapter so far.
Oh, I skipped them all. I just picked up on this one when I saw that you were doing a comparison between two things. Natalie, what's her
ContraPoints. Natalie Wynn.
Yeah, what's her channel called?
ContraPoints.
ContraPoints. When I saw ContraPoints and the Megan Phelps thing, I thought, oh shit, this is interesting because I did watch that ContraPoints video.
Oh,
and it was
so you only watch left-wing media propaganda, is what you're saying?
No, actually, no. I watch your stuff, but not religiously. I've seen Peter Boghossian's stuff. I don't consider him left-wing. There's one other that I have.
You don't consider him left-wing?
Not really, no.
Oh, Reed's here. Reed. He leans left, right? I mean, correct?
Reed, I know you'll say yes to that.
Yeah.
It's just, I see him dabbling. I see him slowly shifting right. But, maybe I'm wrong. But that's how I see it.
I think there's a lot of people on the left who align themselves with some of the things I say.
Oh, that's possible, sure.
Yeah.
But back to your question about...
He's a classical liberal, Reed said.
Liberal reset.
Classical liberal, which is basically...
that term
yeah.
that I...
but under that definition...
This is neoliberal or something like that.
Under that definition, I am also a classical liberal because that's like really hardcore free speech.
Yeah, I suppose.
The free arena of ideas.
Right. You take it to an extreme, I think.
Extreme?
On some things, yeah.
Okay, I was going to let you go, but now I got to hear this. What am I extreme on when it comes to free speech? Because I still say that there should be limits. Like,
oh, okay. Well, tell me what your limits are. Maybe I'm
like the classic yelling fire in a theater. Like where there's a high probability that will cause a stampede and people die. Like I'm against that.
Okay. So if you have things, if you've seen evidence in the history of harm, physical harm or societal harm from certain speech, you think there should be limits on that?
Yes. Like if you were to come on here and give my exact address, and if you had a lot of influence and said so and so or these people should come find me and kill me.
Well, guys like J.K. Rowling.
She never did that. She's never, as far as I know, dogs people and say that people should be hurt physically. But I have no problem with free speech.
So, for example, a politician or somebody in the House of Representatives saying that another politician should be shot because they're a traitor, shot in the head. A bullet will take care of that. Second Amendment will take care of that person. Something like that. You would be against that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely fuzzy lines, and you can go either way, but there's definitely clear cases. But the whole thing, I think what really separates people from the left and right, maybe me and you here, is that I'm totally okay with me saying words and those words causing people to cry in their room. That, I think, is what separates me from a lot of, especially if they're marginally oppressed people.
I think the difference between you and me, I can't speak for the entire left or right, is sometimes where you think that the person you're talking about is just worried about somebody, the only consequence is somebody crying. They're thinking that there's more consequences than that. It's not just...
But that's part of the liberal mind, the leftist mind, I think. It's people who lean left tend to be far more negative and risk adverse on negative things than people leaning right, on average. And that's because I think most people who, you're going to really hate this, but like 60% of the people who lean left are female. And I think the studies show that they tend to be more risk adverse especially on negative things. And so people who lean left would be far less likely to make someone cry through words because they might commit suicide or they might cut themselves or they think of all the terrible things that can happen. Where someone on the right,
I'd be more inclined to think that somebody on the left, I hate this, I think that's a category error, but somebody might be willing to say, oh shit, I hurt you? Oh, I'm sorry. Where somebody on the right might say, oh, God, this doesn't work. I hurt you? Well, you'll live.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with you at that assessment. Like, and the reason why I am the type of person who say, well, grow up, is because I say things on my religious channel all the time that definitely hurt Christians and Muslims, Jews. If I believe that the character mentioned in the Old Testament named Yahweh is, if real, is a schmuck for drowning the planet, for whatever, and if that hurts the feelings of a Jew, an Orthodox Jew, I would look the Orthodox Jew in the eyes and say, grow up already.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly fine with saying grow up. In fact, sometimes I bite my tongue when I'm talking to conservatives yelling at me. I want to yell at them, grow up. And that happens. You may not experience it, but I have. Part of the reason why I got off social media. I'm tired of the threats. Well, you can go die. Oh, the bullshit.
What? People have said that to you?
Yeah, like when arguing about nuclear weapons or everybody owning a gun, things like that. That the right views it. Conservatives view me as forcing everybody to take too much risk, and I should be willing to die if I have these positions. I should be willing to be killed if I'm wrong or something like that. And I think that's BS. And also, I've been yelled at more by conservatives than by liberals. Now, that just may be who I talk to, where I imagine in your case, the shoe's on the other foot. You'd probably get yelled at more by liberals than by conservatives.
Well, someone pointed out earlier, I get yelled at by conservative Christians.
Okay. Well,
yeah, on certain topics.
Religion is a special category.
Yeah.
In my opinion. All right, I'll let you go.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Blasticful says, but Doug, more right-wingers are religious. Sorry they get triggered so easily. Yeah, I agree, Blasticful. There's definitely things that trigger right-wingers as well. Can you hear me? Henrique?
Oh, yeah.
Make sure you close the YouTube tab.
Sorry. Okay.
Is that how you say it, Henrique?
Henrique.
Oh.
The first H is mute.
Henrique.
Yes.
Okay.
Good enough for you.
Good enough for a white boy. That's what you're going to say, right?
Not really.
Well, I am a black man, so anyhow. What did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think you have a point with the transracial thing, but I think one thing that people miss a lot is the transable community, or at least there are some cases.
Yep.
I don't know if you've heard about or seen.
Someone chopped their arm off in the UK, I think, because they identified as an amputee.
Yeah, the first case I saw was this Jewel Shooping, which identified as blind.
Oh, yeah, on Dr. Phil, right?
I don't know where.
There was a person on Dr. Phil who blinded themselves, I think with acid or something.
Yeah. And I think exactly. And the main point is that who helped her becoming who she really was her doctor.
Oh. Yeah. See, this brings up some really interesting dilemmas, because if you say no doctor should ever blind and remove the eyes of a person who has healthy eyes, well, why can't you apply that to uteruses and penises?
Exactly. And the main point I used to bring up with that is, okay, she sees herself as blind.
No pun intended.
No pun intended, exactly.
Yeah.
So what should be treated? Her eyes, or her mind, her brain?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I think that, not sure if that person or that case was in Matt Walsh's documentary, but when he asked about that, the expert in gender, one of them said, no, the mind, of course, that's crazy. But
yeah,
I just wanted to bring that because of the doctor involved.
Okay, but let's say you thought you were a woman.
Mm-hmm.
what would you do? Would you just live, like you would get out of the shower and you'd say, you look at the penis hanging there and you would say, you just live with the fact that you hate it and it's not who you are, and just go see a psychologist every week?
Well,
like, wouldn't
it's
you
very
want to
hard.
have the penis removed, in other words?
Well, the desire to have the part removed would certainly be there, but it's very hard to imagine something I am not. But what I would want to was to, okay, how can I live with reality? I don't want to adapt reality to my fantasies or to my desires. I want to commit to reality. So things are what they are.
Things are what they are, yeah. Yeah. What do you think causes it?
I have no idea.
Like racial, transabled, trans.
I have no idea. Now, it's very hard for me, and I'm a new arrival in the US, to understand the racial divide, because look at me. I'm not black. I'm not white. I'm not Indian, by the way. I could be Indian. Who knows?
Hey, no, if you're applying for a university or a job, I suggest to you check the black box. Because there's a lot
I'm too
of
old for that.
there's a lot of white liberals in the United States who will give you tons of opportunity if you just check that box.
But then again, I was born in Latin America, but I'm not Hispanic. I don't speak Spanish. I understand it a bit.
Well, Americans don't know the difference. Just tell them you're a black man and oppressed, and your great grandfather was a slave, and you'll be fine.
I could not hang out. In fact, my grandma's last name is Beck. Her grandpa was German.
Oh. Oh, so your great grandfather was a Nazi.
Yeah, and I deserve reparations for that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about?
To bring that up. No, that was it.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, and nice to meet you. Do you play poker?
Not at all.
Do you have money?
I wish I did. I wish I did.
Okay. Well, then I won't ask you. Take care. Good to meet you. I've seen your name in the chat before, so it's good to put the face to the name.
Yeah.
Okay.
See ya.
See ya.
Thanks.
Doug, are you going to go back on the Line Trans show again? Maybe. If I do, I think I'll bring up the transracial argument. I think I'd go to therapy. I'm scared of surgery generally. Yeah, I agree, Oak River. I mean, if I really try to put myself in the shoes of a transgender person, I think I'd still be scared to remove body parts. Adding is not as bad. Removing seems worse to me than adding. Because when you add, you can always subtract. But when you subtract, it's harder to add back. And that's like, can you keep your penis in some type of jar with vinegar in it? Pickled penis you can put back on. Sorry, this is crude. I mean, how dare you say pickled penis? Has that phrase ever been uttered on the planet before? Yeah, transabled, transracial, I think they're very similar. Room's open. I don't want to go too long here. How long have I been going today? Oh, it's already 2.5 hours. They use the penis to make the vagina. Oh, no, don't say that. Oh, it's almost lunchtime here. Yeah. Things that make you go, ugh. I'll take things that make you go, ugh, for 500, Alex. Pickled penis is my gaming screen name. Yeah, right. If it is. Wow. Bottom surgery has terrible success rates, average of 5 or 6 revisions, do-overs. Doug's got the hots for ContraPoints. I agreed with ContraPoints on a couple things. ContraPoints said about calling out your in-group. Like when your group, your tribes is something you disagree with, you got to call them out on it. To me, that's huge. That's good. That's great. I agree. And Natalie called out Vaush. Natalie squeezed Vaush and the oil came out. I am a big boob man. Yes, Fenton Molly. Just saw that on Twitter. Myron will stop the music if you call in 2 minutes. Other than that, we'll call it a day. Yeah, I think I like ContraPoints better than Vaush too. I would, you know who I'd love to talk to is not Destiny, not Vaush, the other big guy. I said his name earlier. The guy who looks like a Nazi, but he's a liberal, left-leaning liberal. I don't oppose boob jobs for women over 18, no. Just like I don't oppose transitioning for people over 18. It's about the minor thing. It's about bathrooms. It's about sports. There's only like 3 issues. Not Hassan, no. Or what's his first name? And now I want to talk to him. What's his name? I said it earlier. I would also love to talk to Jon Stewart. I would love Jon Stewart to come on my show and try to trap me. Pac-Man, thank you. Pac-Man is who I meant. I would love to talk to him. And I would love for Jon Stewart to... I think we could have fun trapping each other and using humor. Like, I would love for a guy like Jon Stewart to come on my show and say, what do you have against drag queens, Doug? And just look him in the eye and say, because they're fat and ugly. Like, what would he do with that? I would say most of them are fat and ugly. Or then I would say, oh, well, no, that's partly true, but it's also that they're misogynistic. Because I've seen him try to beat up conservatives with the drag queen issue. And I think conservatives, they just, a lot of them get themselves in trouble. Where's that one? There it is. To combat a guy like Jon Stewart, you gotta use humor right back on him. Jimmy Dore is Doug on the leftist steroids. Jimmy Dore is Doug on leftist steroids. I can tell the Dusty Dud is a few minutes behind. Pickled pecker. I said pickled penis. Let's get the facts straight. Is there such thing as drag kings? That's an interesting question. Have you guys ever seen a drag king? That's why I think it's misogynistic, because you only see drag queens. Am I wrong? What's the political channel version of Poof or Drown? How about monetary fiat gold standard or not? I don't know. Drag kings is a thing. Huh. They're not duplicating for me. Cedar is more down to be fun than Pac-Man. Who's this Cedar person? Hang on. The name sounds familiar. What's his first name? Oh, Sam, right. Yeah, I've seen him before. And I do think he has a better sense of humor. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Poof. Natalie from ContraPoints was scheduled to come on, but we ran out of time. Sorry, Natalie.